Good evening from Jerusalem. Happy to be here again. This evening, I'm not in a delay, no late, so I'm happy to be here. Today, Charlie, we can start and share the presentation.
I'm just getting the right screen. Oh, here we go. Hold on one sec, and here we go.
Great. So, Pesach is in a few days from now. We spoke last week about ancient Egypt. One of the most important questions is, where do we put the line between the ancient and the modern Egypt? And now it depends on the eyes of the viewer. I mean, some can say that modernity starts only in the 20th century. Some others says it started 400 or 500 years ago, during the time when the Ottomans ruled that area and put Egypt, especially the Muslim ruler Muhammad Ali, that we will meet here later on. Anyhow, I choose to speak about transition from the Pharaoh's time to the Greco-Roman time. But before that, I wanted to show you this beautiful synagogue. We are in the evening of Pesach. You can see me over there at the entrance to the biggest synagogue in Egypt. This is the Eliyahu Hanavi synagogue in Alexandria. Practically, I mean, this beautiful synagogue was renovated only 2 years ago. When just before the COVID started, I was there with a group just 1 week before we were closing Egypt for the last exodus from Egypt, and we were one of the first groups who had the chance to visit this new renovated beautiful synagogue. Originally, it started many years ago. It was the first synagogue, not this one, was built here something like 2,000 years ago. There was a very famous and flourishing Jewish community in Alexandria many years ago, during the biblical times and the Talmudic times, and then it has been destroyed and rebuilt only in the 17th century, and again has been totally almost destroyed. What we see here is a renovation of a building that was constructed something at the end of the the beginning of the 20th century. Anyhow, it's a beautiful place, a beautiful museum and a synagogue. Unfortunately, there's hardly no Jewish community in Egypt of today. Speaking about modern Egypt, the Hebrew people are here. Our civilization is here. The pharaonic civilization is no longer exists. Yet a live community, a living community in Egypt. As far as I know, according to my sources, there are 10, not more than 12 people only in that community. They are all in Cairo, old people. And for the last time I've been in Alexandria, as I said, something like 2 years ago plus, we met only one old lady, a Jewish lady, who lives close to the synagogue, and she's taking care of this place. But we need to say, all the Jewish synagogues in Egypt today, and there are 12 in Cairo and 3 in Alexandria, this is one of them, are taken care and managed by the Ministry of Heritage in Egypt, and they are the one who are financing all the reconstructions and the buildings themselves. Sometimes from Israel and from abroad, Jewish groups are coming, just as my group. We've been there, and we are doing prayers there and events, but it's only on holidays. It's only on holidays. Anyhow, it's a beautiful house. The house itself and the synagogue is a part of the small Jewish quarter. It used to be here from the 19th century to the 20th century until 1948, the establishment of the State of Israel. There were in all over Egypt, the Jewish community was something like between 90 to 100,000 people. 75% of them in Cairo, and all the rest are here in Alexandria on the coast of the Mediterranean beach. And they had houses here and Talmud Torah and high school and community houses, a very, very flourishing and very rich community. And one of the most interesting things about the Jewish community of Egypt is that something like 2/3 of them, I'm talking about the 19th and the 20th century, as I said, something like 2/3 of them were originally not from Arab countries and neither from Egypt. They were Ashkenazi from Europe, who immigrated from Europe, even from Eastern Europe and the central parts of Europe, especially from France even, to Egypt, and they were settling down there for a few generations. So it's very funny. You could see people with Ashkenazi names like Zilberstein and Lieberman, who said, yes, we are Egyptians in our nationality, we are Jewish in our religion, but we are European originated from our sources. So it's very unique to Egypt. We don't have any other Jewish community like that in Africa, let's say in Morocco or in Ethiopia or in Algeria or Tunisia or even South Africa. They are all locally originated. Here in Egypt, it's something else. Okay, Charlie. So, speaking about the modernity, the modern Egypt, I think that I wanted to start the talk of today with this picture. It took place. I mean, this picture was taken last May, just a year ago, and to my eyes, it symbolizes the way that the present day's Egypt of Muhammad Ali, the president, he wants to say we are the new Arabs. We know that the pharaonic dynasty and legacy are over, yet we respect them. So what we see here is a ceremony that they just transferred 22 mummies of ancient kings and queens from the Valley of Kings, which were housing for 100 years in the Egyptian Museum in the central part of Cairo, in central Cairo, and they removed them, they relocated them to the new museum, which is called the Ancient Civilization of Egypt. So what you see in the picture is a part of a ceremony, a big extravaganza that was there in May 2021. It was during the COVID time, so everybody could see it on the television and on the web. Anyhow, it symbolizes, according to what Muhammad Bibliotheca Alexandria said, I want to show the world how Egypt is modern. Our feet are in the past, but our head is for modernity. And we are opening new museums in order to show the world that we can run modern museums by ourselves. And he has a message here. His message is that Egypt is starting to ask from all the there are more than 50 Egyptian museums or departments for Egyptian history in all over the world. In the Louvre, in the British Museum, in the Metropolitan, in Turin, in Italy, and whatever. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi wants to say, we are modern. Please start to collect back all the Egyptian ancient museums back to our country. I'm not so sure that he will succeed, especially not in the next few years. Anyhow, in this ceremony took place last year, that was his message of this is modern Egypt. We are stepping ahead to the modernity. Okay, Charlie. Just as a reminder, I spoke about it last week. In a few days, we're going to read the Haggadah of Pesach. We're going to speak about the word in Hebrew or in English, but in Hebrew, Mitzrayim, a few times. Just to remind us, we have two Mitzrayim. Hebrew is the only language which describes the unification of Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. This is why there's double Meitzar, double straits, Mitzrayim. in this area, in the word in Hebrew. Okay, Charlie. And again, here is a reminder. Here is a reminder to see the timetable of the history of Egypt. We spoke about the pre-dynastic, the old, middle, and new kingdoms. And here's the line, more or less at the 3rd or 4th century BC. Some say this is the time that Egypt becomes, it is no longer pharaonic. It is the time of, they speak about the Ptolemy and the Cleopatra the seventh was the last woman who ruled Egypt. And it's hard to say modernity for something that took place or happened more than 2,200 years ago. So, as I said before, it depends on the eye of the viewer. When we say modern Egypt, we speak about how Egypt, not only how Egypt is doing today and what is her challenges. We will talk later on at the end about the conflict with Ethiopia, about the Nile and the dam. Yet, all the things who are not pharaonic are related to be kind of a new Egypt, and the remains we see today. So this is our schedule for today. I mean, we'll talk about the time from the Greco-Roman period, that is the 3rd century BC. Sorry. One of the greatest leaders of the armies of the human history is Alexander the Great. He lived in the 4th century BC, and he captured the majority of the world of that time. That is the Middle East, parts of course, Greece and Turkey and Asia up till Persia, as you can see in the map. And he also invaded Egypt. And the point is that he invaded Egypt in the 4th century BC and started the Greek period at that time, and he ruled that place. Now, the important thing for us is after Greece finished its time in Egypt, they took to Greece lots of the things and information and knowledge that they saw in Egypt. Let's say something in the handwritings and the hieroglyphs and even urban planning principles and architecture and design. They brought it to Greece, and the outcome is that many of the shrines and many of the places and the Greek architecture that we all know, which is very famous, are originally things that they saw and built in Egypt itself. Later on, the Roman Empire will take their lessons or their heritage from Greece. And so we can understand, or we can say today, that Egypt, the pharaonic Egypt, stopped to be pharaonic in the 4th century BC. Yet all its heritage and all the knowledge and information about architecture and science that they knew was heritated to Greece and Rome later on. Charlie? Next time you're in Egypt, don't go only to Alexandria and to Cairo and to Luxor and Abu Simbel. You can take 2 or 3 or 4 days and go to the Western Desert. It takes something like a full day drive from Alexandria. It's very far. And then you will reach one of the 7th oases that we have in the Western Desert. This is the Siwa oasis. That's the name. It's a beautiful place. Don't go there in the summer. Go there in the winter, because then the weather is cool and nice. And then you will find not a big oasis. It's a small town of not more than 22,000 people. And I choose to start it with this, talking about Alexander the Great, because in Siwa, he arrived in the 4th century BC, and he built a temple on his name. You can just please, Charlie. Here we see remains of a city. I mean, this is a modern city. It has been built with mud, only with mud bricks, something like 200 years ago. And in the year 1900 exactly, there was a an event of rain, and it just damaged this whole city. But here on the top of the hill, they found remains of a Greek temple made with the stones. This is why it has remained. And this was the temple of Alexander. It is called the Temple of Alexander the Great. Charlie? This is a viewpoint from the top of the hill. You see the broken houses that are just below the Temple of Alexander. By the way, it's one of the sites of World Heritage by UNESCO. It has been declared 20 years ago. It's a beautiful place, beautiful place. I mean, it's ruined, but sometimes you think so interesting to see a ruined place, which is interesting for the eye and very aesthetic. Okay. Again, this is a viewpoint from the street, from down below. It's very unique because there's hardly no rain in that area. And that surprising event of 2 or 3 hours of rain 120 years ago just destroyed the ancient city of Siwa. They call it the old city. Nobody lives there inside today, only just in the surroundings. And there's a buffer of that UNESCO declared, and they built new houses just below the old city. Okay. And here it is. On the top of the hill, we just views the old city of Siwa. These are the remains made by stone, made by limestone, not mud bricks. So this is the remains of the Temple of Alexander. If you move on to the next slide, you will see how it looks from the inside, and we can see here inscriptions of from the Ptolemaic period of Egypt. And according to the legacy of Alexander the Great, this is the place where he heard or got the kind of a vision, the oracle of Siwa, who just inspired him with a vision. And here, according to the legacy of the Greeks, they say here in Siwa, he got the inspiration that said, one day you'll be the king of Africa. You will rule all over Africa. So that's the legacy in that place. Back to Alexandria. Alexandria, it's the big city that Alexander the Great started and built on his name. It's on the beach. It's on the Mediterranean city. The city that Alexander built 2,300 years ago was not a big city. It had 5 quarters. And later on, just at the Talmudic period, we need to say 2/5 of the whole city were Jewish, with Jewish people at that time. After the Second Temple destruction and the exile from the land of Israel, there was a huge community in Alexandria, and lots of priests and intellectuals worked there, and there was the Bibliotheca, which we will see in a few minutes. Today, Alexandria is the second biggest city in Egypt, more than 5 million people, and it's very modern. It has a nice center. It has beautiful beaches of the Mediterranean, and it is much more liberal than Cairo. Cairo is much more Islamic, and here maybe it's the climate of the Mediterranean, maybe it's the beach, maybe it's just the spirit of the non-Islamic center. We need to say Alexandria. There are Muslims, of course, yet Alexandria is the capital of the Coptic community of Egypt. The Coptic are the Christians of Egypt, and they are the percentage in the population of Egypt is something like 10 to 11% of the population of whole Egypt, which is in total, as you remember, something like 100 million people. So there's a group of 10 to 11 million people who are Coptic. 60% of them, they live in Alexandria and its areas. Okay. We are still in Alexandria, talking about the Greek period. We see in the background the new neighborhoods over there, but yet in the middle, it's a part of an small archaeological park. and we can see here the Pompeii pillar. There's not hardly specific connection to Pompeii that we know in Italy. Rather, this is a part of a center of a divinity center that served the Greek people in Egypt more than 2,000 years ago. There was a shrine here. It has been destroyed, and this is the only item that has been remained from that period. In the underground, below this pillar, we can find today a small museum, not so interesting. The pillar is much more nice in its visibility. And then in the underground, we see remains from that Greek shrine. So they call it as a nickname, the Pompeii's pillar. Okay. One of the most beautiful places in, if you can say, one of the most symbols of modern Egypt is what we see here. This is the Library of Alexandria. It's a modern building. It has been opened in the year 2000 by President Mubarak, and the whole point is a commemoration to the ancient historical Bibliotheca Alexandria, which was formed here by the Greeks. This was the heart of ancient Alexandria. All the information from and all the knowledge in science and in lecture and philosophy of the ancient world, of the whole world, was here in this, not in this building, this is a new building, but it was in the Bibliotheca Alexandria. The ancient building has been destroyed and rebuilt 2 times. The final time it has been totally destroyed, and all the items that were there inside have been burned by the Christians in the 4th century, is no longer there. So this was one of the visions of Sadat and then Mubarak to rebuild the Bibliotheca Alexandria. So this is the new building that we see today. Charlie? This is how it looks like from the top. The whole philosophy of the designers and the architects shows it's a kind of it's like the sunrise. The sun is rising from the water, going up, and this is the roof of this big library. Okay. Here we see ancient pictures and illustrations of how that ancient library looked like. All the philosophers, the Greeks, and also the Jewish ones, brought all their information and their scrolls and the papyrus and the books, and they were installed here. It is amazing. Alexandria was it's like the main server of the internet of that time, if you like. I mean, it's amazing. On the top left picture, that's an old map of Alexandria. You can see the division for quarters, and as I said, you can see on the right side on the top, it's a bit small, but you can see Jewish quarter. It's 2,000 years ago. That is 600 years before the Islam captured Egypt. Yeah, thank you, Charlie. It's on the right side. You see the letters, the word, the Jewish quarter. And there was the pillar, and there was the lighthouse of Alexandria. Alexandria was kind of a lighthouse for the whole world, for the knowledge. And also there was physically a lighthouse, which is considered to be one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world. It is no longer there. It has been destroyed with the whole city. And you remember last week we spoke about the pyramids of Giza, which are the only existing remain of the 7 wonders of the world. All the other 6 have been demolished and are gone. Okay. We are inside now of the library, or the Bibliotheca Alexandria. As I said, a new building, very modern. As far as I know, today there are more than 5 million items physically of books over there, also in Hebrew, and ancient scrolls, and it's a combination between an academic and open library and also a museum. They are open every time we are in Alexandria. I give a half a day and we visit this beautiful place. You see researchers and students there and visitors. It's a very nice building. Okay. Here we see the working space. Of course, very, very modern, very beautiful. It is just above, just below that transparent roof, which get the sun, the natural sun from the top. We spoke about Islam. We'll back to the Islam later. We spoke about Judaism. We will be seeing some more synagogues ahead. But we need to say something about the Christian community of Egypt, the Coptic Cairo. Well, Alexandria is the capital of that community. The Coptic Patriarch of Egypt is based in Alexandria. Yet in Cairo, there is a Coptic quarter with a few hundreds, few thousands of people living there, protecting the churches and all their archaeological stuff. Now, what we will see, I mean, the important thing to see, there are very nice churches there. They are from the 4th and 5th and 6th century AD. Here we are inside one of the most beautiful churches of the Coptic community. It has been renovated. I mean, originally it is from the 4th century, the time that Egypt became Christian. Yeah, it's funny to speak about it. I mean, not funny, but from the 4th century until the 8th century AD, Egypt was dominant by Christian culture. The change to Islam took place at the middle or the end of the 8th century. And since then, the Islam is the majority of the population in Egypt. As I said, something like 90%. Inside this beautiful church, it is very unique because it is based just above an ancient cave. If we move to the next slide, we go now down below in the underground of this of the church of Virgin Mary. That's the name, and we can see here remains that have been renovated during the years. This is an ancient cave, and that's the whole point here. The whole point is the Coptic community says or believes that in this cave, the Holy Family, that is Joseph, Maria, and Jesus, the son, the baby, they fled from the Holy Land when King Herod declared that he is about to kill all the newborn male babies, speaking about Pesach. So they were afraid that they will do something to their son, so they left the Holy Land. And that's the whole point. The legacy of the Coptic community in Egypt says that we are here in Egypt, that is in the heart of Cairo. We are the only place which is outside of the Holy Land that the Holy Family arrived. The Holy Family has never left the Holy Land. They go to Rome, to the Vatican, or Turkey, or the Orthodox areas. There was only one time that they left that country and stayed here for a few months until they went back to Nazareth in the Galilee, and all the rest is history. So this is why, this is one of the proud of the Coptic community in that place. And you can see on the left, one of the nice mosaics on that church on the top, that you can see that story of Joseph and Maria and Jesus the baby are leaving the Holy Land to Egypt. Cairo Citadel, it's the highest place in Cairo. I'm laughing because I'm joking because Cairo is all over Egypt. Beside of Sinai, all over Egypt is a flat area. Yet over here we have a kind of a small hill, and the Crusaders and later on the Ottomans and the Mamluks, they built here a nice citadel, which today combines shrines and mosques and mausoleums. That one of them is a very famous person is built inside. We'll see it. Okay. This is the mosque of Muhammad Ali. Muhammad, not Muhammad. The Arab and the English, of course, pronunciation is Muhammad. Muhammad. But originally, the person who is buried here inside he was a Turkish man. He was an Ottoman ruler of Egypt for 50 years in the 19th century. So the right pronunciation of his name is Muhammad Ali, one of the famous and strongest rulers of the 19th century. He made Egypt modern for sure. Here there's no dispute about if and when Egypt became modern. Muhammad Ali, which you will see, I think, in the next slide. Yeah, there it is. Again, he was originally from Turkey. For that, we are talking about a part of the 400 years that the Ottomans from Turkey, they ruled the whole area of the Middle East beside Morocco. They could not handle with the Atlas Mountains over there, yet they controlled Egypt, the land of Israel, and other parts. And Muhammad Ali, he ruled Egypt at half part of the 19th century. He was very modern. He was very liberal. He focused on the economy, on letting the other communities of the Jews, of the Christians, to live with their own faith and their belief. He's the one for sure who made Egypt modern at that time. Okay. And now we are inside the mosque of Muhammad Ali. This is the area of the praying, and his grave is just on the right side of this stage that you could see on the right side. It's one of the holiest places for the Muslims in Egypt. They are very proud of this person. And again, remember the dispute between the pharaonic times and the Islamic times. The Muslims in Egypt, they know we are not pharaohs. We are Muslims originally. We are from Arabia. So they have a conflict in showing which legacy. So this is why the tomb and the mausoleum and the mosque of Muhammad Ali at the Citadel is a very important site for them, for their heritage, for their Islamic heritage. Anyhow, it's a beautiful place, this mosque. Okay. From the Islam to Judaism, we are here inside the remains of the Jewish quarter in the area of El Fustat, the ancient Cairo. We are inside. This is the view of the inner parts of the Ben Ezra synagogue, one of the 12 synagogues who are in Old Cairo. All of them, by the way, in the peace agreement between Israel and Egypt from 1970, which has been signed in Washington, D.C. in March 1979, there is a chapter saying that Egypt, the government of Egypt, will protect and will manage and will reconstruct and will finance all the Jewish heritage sites, that is the cemeteries, houses, libraries, tombs, and synagogues. And this is the result. It took something like 15 years. And what we see here is a beautiful synagogue from the 10th century AD. Now, there are many synagogues in Egypt, as I said, but there's something which is very unique in this one. Let's move ahead. This is how it looks like from the outside. As I said, they renovated the synagogue. It's a nice building, but the point is what they found, what has been found here more than 120 years ago, the Ben Ezra synagogue. I guess the majority of you, they know the story. At the end of the 19th century, in the something like 1870s, 1880s, there was a visit of two nuns from Scandinavia, and they found in the upper storage rooms of that synagogue, this specific synagogue, they found lots of boxes, as also in the underground, but also in the second floor. They found lots of boxes with lots of items, papyrus, paper, and hieroglyphs and other stuff. And they knew that someone in Europe, Professor Solomon Schechter, which you can see him here, he's a researcher of the biblical time. They told him when they got back to Europe, to England, about what they found here in Cairo. He knew what he's going to find. He rushed to Cairo and he just started to collect as much as he could of his of these items. So this is what we called the Geniza of Cairo. What you see on the picture on the left, the big picture is Professor Schechter in his working room in the University of Cambridge in England, while he was working on developing and cleaning and researching some parts of the thousands and thousands of items of the information of Jewish heritage of that time. So let's move to the next slide. What we see here, so what is the Cairo Geniza actually? The Cairo Geniza is in general a collection of tens of thousands of items on paper and papyrus, dating from more or less from the 9th century AD until the 13th century AD. That is a capsule of time of something like 400 years of Jewish Hebrew inscriptions and items which tell us lots of information and knowledge of the Jewish, not only of the Jewish community of Cairo, rather on the relations of the Jewish community over there with Israel, with the land of, with the Jews in Israel, with the Jews in Morocco, in Europe, about commercial everyday life, not only about holy life, not only books of the Bible, not only books of Mishnah and Talmud, rather everyday life and even books for learning Hebrew. So take a look what you see on the right side on the top. We see here a part of a book for children to study Hebrew. We can see inscriptions of the Ben Maimon Harambam. I like the picture on the left, on the top left. It's a small model which is here in Tel Aviv in the Diaspora Museum in the Tel Aviv University. They built there over there a nice small model showing how they found how Professor Schechter, when he reached to Cairo, he went up to one of the walls, inner walls in the synagogue, and he started to pick up and to collect that area. Well, today you can go, there are lots of books about it. In general, when you say the Cairo Geniza, you speak about a specific, it's a discipline. It's an academic, total discipline. Researchers this is their career in Israel, in the United States, in England, and today the majority of the items are in Cambridge University. Although I don't know, I think more than 75 or even 80% of the items have been screened, digital, modern. You can see them on the web, but the original ones are also, part of them are in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, and some parts in the small archaeological museum in Haifa even. But the majority, as I said, is in Cambridge.
If I can just interject just for 1 second, and a whole bunch of them are also here in New York at the seminary. And there's actually fragments in a variety of other libraries throughout the world. CSP ran an amazing program with a professor from Princeton, who is directly involved with the fragments and putting them together on the internet and the scanned ones. And it's an amazing program that I hope Ari will include in the follow-up. Thanks.
Yeah, the Cairo Geniza is something, it's an amazing world. And again, the point here, it gives us an information of how the world looked like at that time, how the Jewish community, it tells us a lot about the Hebrew, the ancient Hebrew that was spoken at that time, about the community life. You can find there letters, between men and women about everything. It's an amazing corpus of knowledge. Let's move ahead. We'll see some parts of it. Here we see from the Geniza. I like this one very much. It's from the 14th century AD, and it's a kind of something on the wall. Baruch atah bevoacha ubaruch atah betzatcha. You are most welcome when you enter, and you are most welcome when you go out. It is very unique, this specific fragment, this specific item, because it is dated 100 years earlier than the generally accepted date for the rise of the Hebrew printing in Europe. So they did it already here before that, here in Cairo. Yeah, there were lots of synagogues at that time. Let's move ahead, see few more items. Just especially for today, a few days before the Pesach, here's a piece or fragments from the Haggadah from the early 14th century. You can see the perfect Hebrew, the remains, unbelievable. So exciting to see it. Here we see one of the autographs, which is under dispute, whether it belongs to Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, the Maimonides. He lived over there. His house was over there in Cairo, in ancient Cairo. He was teaching in a few synagogues over there, and he lived there before he came back to Israel, and then he came back to Cairo. We have lots of information and items connecting to the Rambam. Okay. What you see here, these are inscriptions of handwriting in Arabic letters, but the language is Hebrew, written by the hands of the Rambam, which were found in the Cairo Geniza. By the way, we need to say, the majority of the stuff, and the most famous one, is the Ben Ezra synagogue. Yet, the researchers, just after Professor Schechter, during the 20th century, they found also other Geniza items and pieces of knowledge like that, also in other Jewish cemeteries all over there, and also in other synagogues, and even in Alexandria, but the majority are here in Cairo. So here it is going to be handwriting in Arabic and Hebrew words of the Rambam. Okay. Speaking about the Rambam, 2 years ago, as I said, just before the COVID, I managed to reach not a famous synagogue, another synagogue in other parts of Cairo. It's very hard to reach there. It's inside a very dense neighborhood, which is not so nice to walk over there. No Jews over there for many years. But here we see the entrance on the right side on the bottom. We see the entrance to the Ben Maimon synagogue. On the top right, you see his figure, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon, and then you can see his signature, which has been found on scrolls of paper and papyrus in this synagogue. And on the left, the big picture, you can see the place where he was sitting on the floor and teaching his students Hebrew and science and medical science and philosophy and all the knowledge. One of the most genius Jews from all the times. So this is the Ben Maimon synagogue. Okay, Charlie. This is how it looks. This is the main hall for the prayers in the Ben Maimon synagogue. It has been, half of it has been destroyed during the 1940s and 50s, especially after the Jewish community left there. So something like, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, the government of Egypt financed and rebuilt the synagogue as it was originally. So what we see here is the main hall. It's beautiful. And it's very, very exciting to visit this place. I was there just lately in January, now in 2-3 months ago. and it is always very exciting to come and visit the synagogue. They brought a Torah book from Israel, the Israeli embassy, and they put it. You see it on the Aron over there in the middle. It's a very nice building. And as I said, there are 12 synagogues in 12 synagogues in Cairo. 6 of them have already cleaned and renovated. Now we need to wait for the other 6 to be cleaned and renovated and rebuilt again by the government of Egypt. Okay. The relationship between Israel, the modern state of Israel, and modern Egypt in the 20th century is well known. We had, it's amazing to think about it, guys. Think about it. We had 4 wars in 25 years between the 2 countries. The War of Independence, 1948. They bombed Tel Aviv. The Battle of Sinai in 1956. When Israel captured the Sinai Peninsula for 3 months until Ben Gurion said, we need to withdraw from that area. Then the 6 Days War, when Israel captured the Sinai Peninsula. And then the last one, and it will be the last one, the Yom Kippur War in 1973. Now think of that. I know the audience here, I don't need to tell you about the modern history of these 4 wars. But I was just thinking today, before preparing for the lecture, just think about it. We are almost 50 years after the last war between our 2 countries. And we are more than 40 years after where the peace agreement is existing, with all the challenges all the way. The war in Lebanon, the Palestinian uprisings. You all know the late history of the last 20, 30, and 40 years. Yet we are more time in the relationships of friendship than the time that we were in war with Egypt. It's a very nice thing. I mean, it's a very important thing to think about it, to my opinion. Okay. I was a young kid in 1977 when President Sadat declared that in a few days he's willing to come to Jerusalem. It was, I think you all remember this. Wherever you've been in Israel or another place, it was an amazing historical event. Only 4 years after the Yom Kippur War, when he was the one who declared that he's willing to sacrifice more than 1 million of Egyptian soldiers in order to destroy Israel. That's what he said. That was one of his declarations of Sadat. 4 years after, he landed in Jerusalem, and okay. And then, as we all know, in March 1979, the picture on the left, and you can see the signatures of the leaders on the agreement. There was the peace agreement between the 2 countries. Menachem Begin, the prime minister, he visited Egypt 3 times. 3 times, not only in Cairo. He visited Cairo, of course, and Luxor, and Abu Simbel, all the sites that we've seen last week. There was an embarrassing moment. I think I spoke about it last week. An embarrassing moment when he was so proud that he got a suite on on the Mina House Hotel, which is facing the pyramids. He said, "Oh, it's so nice to see the pyramids that our ancestors built." And then Yigael Yadin, the archaeologist, he told him, "Mr. Prime Minister, I apologize, but our people, our ancestors, I mean, our ancient fathers, they did not build the pyramids because the pyramids were there 1,000 years before all the history of the exodus of Egypt." So then Menachem Begin asked for the Israel stele in the museum, and I spoke about it. Okay. As we all know, unfortunately, in October 1981, by the way, it was while there was a military parade the Egyptians, they celebrated, they marked the 8th year of their victory, according to their point of view, on the Yom Kippur, the 1973 war. It took place here, this place, in modern parts of Cairo. And during that event, President Sadat has been killed. There was an assassination by one of the extremists of the Islamic movement in Egypt, and they killed Anwar Sadat. Okay. So what you see here today is a kind of a same place. And then there was a decision to bury him. What you see here, this is the mausoleum, the tomb of Anwar Sadat. And the tomb itself is on the left. You can see the small picture. Yet it is just under a very modern pyramid, which you can see over there, which was there before the assassination. Again, we need to say something about President Sadat. He also visited Israel not only once. He also had 3 visits. The first one, which is the most famous one, in Jerusalem in November 1977. But in the coming years, until he was killed, he visited Beersheba in the Negev, and also in Haifa. And to Haifa, he arrived not with a plane, he arrived with a boat from Alexandria. He said, I want to reach Israel by a boat, not by air this time. Muhammad Anwar al-Sadat. Okay. Now, to conclude, speaking about modern Egypt, we need to ask, what is the main challenge of the Egyptian society of today, the Egyptian nation? They are worried of many things. You can speak about the COVID, you can speak about the economy, but we need to say that since 2014, when Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is the president, you see Egypt is not a democracy, yet you see lots of signs of democracy, more human rights, more rights for women, for journalists, and for the media is a bit more open, and there is a new building. They are building a new administrative city, the administrative capital, eastern to Cairo, which is about 80% of it is already built. That should be the new capital of the administrative capital of Egypt. Yet, if you ask every Egyptian in the street and along the Nile, what are they most afraid of, is this thing, what you see here. Now, this is not in Egypt, it's in Ethiopia. This is the dam in Ethiopia. It's called the water dam, just above the Nile from the air. It's called the Renaissance, the dam of the Renaissance. This is the biggest project of Ethiopia. This challenge is amazing because the Egyptians are afraid. What is the whole problem about? The Egyptians are afraid that Ethiopia will change the regime of the water that flows from Ethiopia to Egypt. This dam has been constructed already. It is built. It is not yet been opened totally. Yet it is built something like 70%. As far as I know, it should be opened for full capacity in a year and a half or 2 years from now. So if we move to the next slide, which is hardly, I think, one of the last slides for today. Okay. Take a look at the map. The map on the left. We see the path of the Nile. As I think we spoke about it maybe last time. If not, let's do it again. The longest river in the world and the most important, the most interesting river in the world that created Egypt is the Nile. It has the main source in Ethiopia. You see Lake Tana, and then it goes down to the south, west, and then goes to the north to Khartoum in Sudan, where he meets the other Nile coming from Lake Victoria on the equator in Central Africa, and the borders between Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. Now, Ethiopia is building, you see the red spot over there, that's the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Water Dam. The point that Ethiopia says, we want to control the water to ourselves in order to produce power, electric power to ourselves, and also to control water, to have them in order, instead of that the whole water will flow as it is, goes naturally for thousands of years to Egypt. Now, Egypt is afraid that the water that are coming from Ethiopia, and the quantity is something like 82% of the water that derives up to Egypt, their source is in Ethiopia. All the rest are from Uganda, which is too far, as you can see, the Lake Victoria area. So that's the main fear of the Egyptians. By the way, political sciences in Egypt and in the Western world, they say that one of the reasons that the regime of Mubarak, one of the reasons that Mubarak was, there was the coup over there 11 years ago, was that the people of Egypt were not satisfied of the way that Mubarak treated that conflict. They say that he was not too strong enough facing Ethiopia, and he did not prevent Ethiopia from building that dam that risks the lives of 100 million of Egyptians that get their water from Ethiopia. Just to remind us, in Egypt there's no rain, and they don't pump water from the ground. There are some desalination plants on the Mediterranean coast, yet the whole water is from there. So what we all need to wait and hope, in the last 3 years, the leaders of the two countries, the president of Ethiopia, and Dr. Abiy Ahmed, the winner of the Nobel Prize, for Peace Nobel Prize in 2019, although there was a becoming of a tragic war in Ethiopia, and Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, they are in dialogue. Even the White House in the United States is running this dialogue for the last 3 years. We all need to hope, we must hope that there won't be that this conflict will remain on the maps and on presentations, and Ethiopia will let the water flow enough to Egypt, because otherwise some researchers are afraid that we have here all the seeds to have maybe a war between the two countries. Let's hope it will not take place, and the peace between Egypt and Israel, which existed more than 40 years now, will reflect also to the south, to Africa itself, and that Ethiopia will be wise enough to find and compromise about this thing. So this is the main conflict of Egypt of today. That's it, guys. A bit of modern Egypt of today. You're most welcome to visit this beautiful, amazing country. Amazing. Thank you so much.
So we want to thank you for an excellent presentation. We have a couple of questions. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. So my first question that came up a lot in the chat is has to do with really the relationship between Israel and Egypt, and in particular, travel. Right? We know that the number of Israelis visiting Egypt is much higher than the number of Egyptians visiting Israel. So what does that say about the relationship between the two countries? And in your experience and travel experiences, I guess what it boils down to is, I guess, what's the attitude towards Israel of modern Egyptians?
We need to say, first of all, the reason why there is not mass tourism from Egypt to Israel is, we need to remember, Egypt is a poor country. It's not like Israel. The 95% of those 100 million of Egyptians, they earn something like $400 to $700 or $800 per month. They don't have the expenses or the way to go and travel to Israel to buy a ticket. Also, the other reason is that the Egyptian society, although I was very optimistic, but although it's more than 40 years, there's still hesitations regarding Israel. You don't find these hesitations in Morocco or in Ethiopia. There's something specific in the Egyptian social atmosphere regarding Israel. It's a matter of education, because the majority of the Egyptians of today were not born during the time of those 4 wars between 1948 until 1973. Yet, there is something which is very delicate, very sensitive in the way that they educate. Although I know, and I'm with connections with academics in Egypt and others, there are winds of change, but it takes time. Practically, we need to say, when the Israelis, when we visit Egypt practically, you don't see any sign of anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism, nothing. I'm traveling in Egypt for more than 20 years. Nothing, knock on wood. I mean, it doesn't happen over there, because it's also a matter of the tourism police who takes care. But it's also, they want us, they need our money, they need to share. The problem is in specific area layers of the Egyptian society, not everybody.
All right, so my next question, I have to get into the right right mind frame for it. So if everyone can just give me 1 second. Just get okay, so my question has to do, this question, which is actually a very serious question, has to do with cultural identification. There's many layers in Egypt today, right? In terms of, yes, Elise, I'm wearing a pharaoh hat, yes. So you're not imagining it. There's many different layers in terms of cultural influence. You have the pharaohs, you have the Coptics, you have the Turks, and now you have sort of the modern age, and also you have the Islamic regimes. So in terms of culturally, which one of these groups really resonates the most with the average Egyptian person on the street today?
It's a very easy answer. The Islam. Egypt is the Cairo is the present capital of the Islamic world. This is their vision. It started at the time of Gamal Abdel Nasser in the 1950s and 60s and the 70s. They said, we are the capital of Africa, of the Arab world, and the Islamic world. 3 circles. That is Cairo, that is Egypt. And they succeed. Egypt is the biggest, is the strongest. I mean, Morocco is much more modern, let's say. Ethiopia has the water. Algeria and Libya are very weak in the geopolitics. Egypt controls the dominance of the Middle East. That's one of the successes, the big successes of Nasser from the 1950s. To make it was not like that before.
Right.
So this is what you find today. The Islam, yet they are compromising with the Coptic. I mean, they have challenges with the Coptic community, with the Jewish. We spoke about. Just to remind us, all the finance of the restoration of the Israel and the Jewish synagogues in Egypt is on the expense of the Egyptian government. They are not willing to accept not even $1 for Jewish communities from the world or from the Israeli government. They say, it's in our territory, we will do it. That's their honor, the famous Arab honor. We will do it by ourselves.
Do you read Arabic?
No, I can speak.
So, but in terms of the restorations that they've done, is there any spin? Do they try to change the story or whitewash over it?
No. You can see the descriptions over there in Arabic and in English also. They respect. they say we have lots of great respect to the ancient Jewish community in Alexandria and in Cairo. And we are in relationships, I mean, officially with the state of Israel. The problem of the Egyptian society is with the related, I mean, according to Israel, towards Israel, is due to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That's and the occupied territories, so-called, or Judea and Samaria. That's the problem. That's the core of the story. And something like with the Zionism, I mean, they are defining between Judaism and Zionism. Because Jews lived in Egypt for many, many years, for hundreds of years. The community, as I said before, the community of, think of the Rambam, of the Alexander and Philon Alexandroni, and they wrote, and physicians and philosophers and medical, Egypt knows about the Jewish heritage in their country. They respect it. Their problem is with the Zionism.
So let me ask a question that's come through the chat directly to me from Tom Barth. Are those restorations of the synagogues, are they for us or for the people who live in Egypt? Like, are they visiting the synagogues? One thing that Tom's question really points to, your pictures are excellent. And it just happens that the synagogues, when you take the pictures, there's nobody there.
You're right. Nobody's visiting there. Only Israeli groups or Jewish groups, if they come. Well, while you take a look at the tourists' information websites of Egypt, you will find these places. You will find the synagogue of Ben Ezra in Cairo. You will find the synagogue of Eliyahu Hanavi in Alexandria. The philosophy of Egypt says like that: we are a mosaic of cultures. Mm-hmm. So those Jewish synagogues are a part of our mosaic layers of pharaohs and Islamic people and Coptic people and Jewish, and that's it. This is how they see it. But you are right. You hardly don't see the mass groups. They go to the pyramids, to the temples in the south, and that's it. But I mean, I think the big synagogue in Alexandria is amazing. I saw there for the last time few groups of Japanese and others. It's a beautiful building. By the way, the name of, you would not believe what is the name of the street that synagogue of Eliyahu Hanavi is located over there in Alexandria. The name of the street is Nabi Daniel, which means the prophet Daniel. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. According to our tradition, the prophet Jeremiah ended his days in Alexandria, I believe. Is there like a monument to like Jeremiah there or something like that?
No, as far as I know, no.
Okay. Let me ask you a question.
Thank you. I have now good homework for the next year.
I always
for next
that.
Pesach.
Please, that would be great. I have a question, one other question, which is please don't hear it as critical. I want to ask you as a Jew of the diaspora, okay? And it came from a message in the chat. So we work pretty hard when we talk about dates to talk of BC as BCE and AD as CE, the Common Era. And you're not the only Israeli professor or academic I've heard using BC and AD. Is that not common in Israel, or is it more of an academic thing? Can you help us understand? For us, we work hard at it because we want to make sure that time is not looked at in a Christian way. So maybe if you could address that.
It's a nice question. Thank you, Charlie. I mean, I was not thinking about it too much. We usually here in Israel, and I'm a guide here in Jerusalem, in the Old City, talking about Judaism, Christianity, Islam. We used to turn the terms BC, before counting. You can say it's also before Christ, but before counting, and then AD. You find this, which is, Anno Domini, that's the meaning in Latin. uh, or common era, but AD is very common once one is speaking English. I don't know how it's in French or in German, let's say, but in English, many Israelis scholars, we use these terms, BC and AD, as far as I know, but
Ahuva doesn't agree with you, but I'll let you guys talk, directly with one another. I can tell you one interesting thing, or I find it interesting, is that in my work circles, we use BC recently to talk about before COVID, of all things.
yeah, I know. Before COVID is the new, yeah. We all know.
So I'm just looking at the clock, and I just want to honor people's time. The Passover Seder is fast approaching, and the Haggadah is ultimately means that the telling, right? And so, I think that today's program was pretty amazing. And not just because, actually this week in today's program were pretty amazing, not just because of the history that we learned, but because the evolution of the relationship also between Israel and Egypt. And I would encourage us this year at our Seder, so many, a few hundred people participated, is what are you going to tell? What story are you going to tell? And I think one of the things that you mentioned today so beautifully, Benny, is about the years of peace between Israel and Egypt, a cold peace, not necessarily a social peace, but that, I don't think many lives, if any, have been lost on that border for nearly 40 years, right? What story are you going to tell around your Seder table? And I think that, Benny, these presentations have given us a lot of information about the meaning of the name Egypt and some of these places in the past, and also some of these places today. And we hope that CSP isn't just about the learning, it's also the expectation or the hope or the anticipation that people will share what they learn with others. So when you sit around your table this year, we hope that the telling of the story is also one that you've learned from CSP. So I'd like to thank our presenter today, our speaker today, Dr. Benny Furst, for an excellent presentation. Thank you for taking you to the land of our forefathers and foremothers, and we look forward to going on many other journeys with you real soon. We want to wish everybody a happy and healthy Seder and Passover, and we look forward to seeing you real soon. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you all. Chag Sameach.
Take care. Chag Sameach.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.